Hello, and welcome to Dark Hearts with Stacy Lee. Before we begin, please hit the like button if you like the video and subscribe to my channel and the channel of all the creators that you like. It helps so much. You can also join my Patreon. That keeps the videos coming, and we are raising money for a very important cause. I will talk about that at the end of the video. Today, I have for you three stories of stalking turned deadly. I'm going to be totally honest, I have some ulterior motives today. Recently, a video went viral on TikTok of a very dorky guy who calls himself Alpha Dom and says he's a dating coach, lecturing men on how they do not have to accept no from a woman. This video has been passed around and talked about for weeks now, and I'm surprised this guy's account is still up. People were roasting him so hard, and he deserves it. But what shocked and disgusted me is that there were some comments agreeing with this man. Now, before we go too far down the man-blaming rabbit hole, I have also seen, as of late, social media stories about women obsessed with men that they will not leave alone. I have seen women obsessed with women, men obsessed with men. This is a universal problem. It seems that some of us have forgotten something very important. No is a complete sentence. No means no, period. There is no discussion after the word no. In the early 1900s, there were men on the street called mashers, and their entire goal was to harass women on the street, just for fun. Women began wearing bigger and bigger hat pins. Some of them were 12 inches long, so they could defend themselves against these mashers. Suffragists and sex workers combined forces and began protests, saying that it is a woman's right to move freely while alone. 100 years later, we still haven't mastered that concept. Over the last week, I have watched 3 or 4 viral TikToks of women just minding their own business, walking down the streets in New York, when a man comes up to them and punches them in the face. I've also seen videos of women just sitting and reading a book or eating their lunch, and a man comes up to them and starts bothering her. She tells the man, "I don't want to talk to you," and he will persist. It's wrong, plain and simple. But I also see that some of the women being bothered make a very important mistake. They allow it to continue. If you are being bothered, some of you aren't gonna like this, but this is my theory. Stand up and start screaming as loud as you can. If you are being pestered or followed, start screaming. I used to tell my dance students, and now I tell my granddaughters, make a scene. I'm gonna make t-shirts that say, make a scene. If anyone starts bothering you or following you, make a scene. It is so deeply ingrained in our minds that we have to be polite. And you do not have to be polite to someone who is bothering you. Let's say it again, you do not have to be polite. Also, if you see someone bothering another person, make a scene. Stand up and say something. Who's up for make a scene t-shirts? I am in the middle of t-shirt designing right now. Tell me if you would like one that says make a scene. Maybe we put like an anti-trafficking phone number on the back or something. We have got to talk about staying safe more often. And we have to talk about what happens to people that cannot get the help they need and how we need to change those laws. So let's jump in to 3 cases of deadly stalking. I'm your host, Stacy Lee. Let's begin. Zohreh Sadeghi is troubled. Zohreh is a podcast host who lives in Redmond, Washington, which is near Seattle. Her podcast is made for Farsi-speaking people, and on it she talks about how immigrants and Farsi speakers can find jobs in the tech industry. In the course of producing that podcast, Zohreh had become friends with this man, Ramin. Ramin's last name is very long, so please forgive this one time I will try to pronounce it. Khodakaramrezaei. Ramin listened to Zohreh's podcast, and he was a fan. So much so that he began sending Zohreh emails telling her how much he admired her, what she was doing, and that he would listen to her podcast over and over, even though he was not looking for a job in the tech industry. This was back in 2021. Zohreh was happy to have such a supportive listener. At first, she was polite and she communicated with this fan of hers, but then things took a turn and she began to grow concerned. The emails took on a much darker tone, and so Zohreh told Ramin she no longer wanted to converse with him. He continued to email her over and over, demanding that she speak with him. At one point, when Zohreh thought that they were actually friends, she had given Ramin her phone number. And that was a mistake, she found out later on. Ramin started sending her texts over and over and over. He made his living as a truck driver, and he was based in Texas. He was 38 years old at the time of these events, and he was divorced. Ramin and his ex-wife remained friendly, and around January of 2023, this ex-wife, who does not wish to be named, noticed a change in Ramin. She says that Ramin first told her he had a girlfriend in Washington State and that this girlfriend was Persian and she had a podcast for Farsi-speaking people. Now, it has never been confirmed that Ramin and Zohreh dated. In fact, Zohreh was married to this man, 35-year-old Mohammad Nasari, who was an Amazon engineer software developer. Zohreh and Mohammad lived here in this $1.6 million home. It's a beautiful home near Seattle. As soon as Zohreh told Ramin to stop contacting her, he lost it. One day, he left her 88 voicemails. This is a small example of the correspondence between the two. Well, I should say the one-sided correspondence, Ramin harassing Zohreh. Ramin would leave voicemail after voicemail. Here you can see Zohreh's call log, a list that she kept in her notes detailing the number of times Ramin would contact her and what she would say to him when he did. Then she records the dates on which she blocked Ramin's numbers, but then that the calls continued to come in. If you look at this log, you can see that in some of these messages, Ramin told Zohreh that he was in her neighborhood and was there to visit her, and she tells him in no uncertain terms to go away and leave her alone. Ramin showed up at Zohreh's house with flowers. He even hired a band to stand outside Zohreh's home and play music. I mean, ugh. Finally, Zohreh had had enough. On February 22nd, 2023, Ramin sent Zohreh 82 texts via Telegram and called her more than 100 times. She went to the police and filed a request for a temporary restraining order. In that request, Zohreh wrote, quote, "Ramin has bursts of anger and is completely delusional. These delusions make me fear for my life and the lives of my loved ones." Zohreh was granted a TRO, which is a temporary restraining order, on March 3rd, and then there was a hearing scheduled for March 27th. Neither Zohreh or her husband would live to see the hearing. On the night of March 23rd, 2023, Ramin broke into the couple's Seattle home. He climbed through a window at 2 o'clock in the morning and first encountered Zohreh's mother, who lived with the couple. This mother was well aware of who Ramin was, and she was known to sit at the window, watching out for hours on end to see if Ramin was in the area. These people were being terrorized. So when Ramin first enters the home, he sees Zohreh's mother. He pushes her aside, and then she ran from the home to the neighbors to get help. Ramin then walked into Zohreh and Mohammad's bedroom and shot them both to death. He then turned the gun on himself, ending his own life. People in this neighborhood were shocked. They knew the family to be very kind and quiet. To hear that there was a double murder in this very peaceful neighborhood was disturbing. But when people found out what Zohreh had been through, it made it even worse. Police would later say that she did everything that she could have done, but she was killed anyway.
3 people now dead, a husband and wife, and the man who pulled the trigger. Redmond police say the wife ran a podcast, and that's how her alleged stalker knew her.
We may never know why somebody would do this.
On a quiet residential street in Redmond, gunfire erupts overnight. 3 people now dead after a potential stalker breaks into this home.
They said that he was stalking her, so there has certainly been a history.
Redmond police say the shooter is a 38-year-old truck driver from Texas. He had a no-contact order filed against him from the woman living here.
This is just a tragic situation that we don't often see that in Redmond.
Her mom was the one who called 911. She managed to escape and run for help.
He had an altercation with the mother. Sounds like he shoved her, and then she was able to escape to the neighbors.
Her 35-year-old husband, shot in the chest, found dead on the front lawn.
And this is just a really unfortunate event that happened, and I'm not sure what could make someone do that, to be honest.
Zohreh did do everything she could on paper. She absolutely did. But there are more steps you can take. I would absolutely arm myself if I were her. I'm not telling you what to do. I am just saying what I would do. I also really strongly encourage everyone to have the best alarm system you can possibly afford. For me, I have that. Plus, I also have two very loud and very territorial dogs that are the best alarm system you can have. And there's no disarming them. Dogs are great because they let you know when someone is around your house, even if the alarm fails, and that gives you time to get to your sidearm. This case makes me sad and it makes me angry. This lunatic had no right to make Zohreh and her family live in fear. And we must beef up our stalking laws. By the way, the notice of the hearing was never even served on Ramin. The process servers later said that because he was a truck driver, he was hard to locate. This is part of what I'm talking about. Yes, file the paperwork. Yes, go through the legal process. But also, yes, be prepared to protect yourself. Because as we are all painfully aware, criminals don't care about what is legal and what is not. Criminals don't care that you have filed a piece of paper with the court. In the end, it is up to you to protect yourself. As harsh as that sounds, it's the truth.
Police emergency. Go ahead, caller.
Please, I've just come back to my flat and the door was locked, so I crawled through the window and my flatmate's covered in blood in the bathroom.
Is she breathing?
I don't know, I can't look, I'm sorry.
Okay, try and stay calm. What's your call?
She's called Alice. Alice! 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 Oh my God, Jesus!
This story begins in 2015 in Newcastle, England. This is Alice Ruggles. She was a 24-year-old Northumbria University graduate. She was also heavily involved in the fencing community. Alice met this man, Harry Dillon, on Facebook through a mutual friend's post. Harry's real name is Tremon, but he goes by Harry. The two began messaging over the internet and then decided to meet up in person. They met once and then again, and after that, a very fast-moving relationship developed. Too fast-moving. Just weeks into the relationship, Harry began belittling Alice. He was very verbally abusive to her. Alice's friends and family were not aware of how bad things were, but they knew they didn't like Harry. They watched as Harry engaged in gaslighting Alice, and they knew that the relationship was very toxic. Then Harry cheated on Alice, and when she found out that was the last straw, she broke up with him. Alice told Harry she never wanted to see him again. But Harry had other plans. First, he began leaving her messages, and I'm talking about hundreds and hundreds of messages. He would text, he would leave voicemail recordings, he would send messages through WhatsApp, he would send Snapchats. In the beginning, Alice would respond, telling Harry to just leave her alone, but then she stopped replying altogether. So what did Harry do? He began showing up unannounced at Alice's front door. This went on for months and months, and Harry's messages got darker and darker. In August of 2016, Alice received a landslide of messages from Harry, and he was now using multiple different phones to contact her. Sometimes in the messages, he professed his undying love. Sometimes he would break down or cry, and then other times he was threatening her and he was angry. Harry told Alice that he was going to release nude photos of her that he had taken secretly. He was truly obsessed and totally unbalanced. Then Alice started hearing strange sounds when she used her mobile phone, and she became convinced that Harry had somehow hacked into her phone so he could listen to her conversations. Alice's brother Nick helped Alice restore the phone to its factory settings in order to wipe out any sort of spyware that Harry may have installed on the phone. Then Alice found out that Harry had done all of this before. Harry's ex-fiancée, a woman named Eniko Nemeth, contacted Alice and told her that she had been harassed by Harry on the streets in public with her new boyfriend after they broke up. Harry actually walked up to his ex-fiancée and her new boyfriend and spit in her face and called her a bitch. And then Eniko filed a restraining order against Harry. By October of 2016, Alice was genuinely scared of Harry. She filed what is called a police information notice report and detailed the harassment she was experiencing. It did absolutely nothing. The police basically ignored the report and offered Alice no support of any kind, which is somewhat surprising because in A lot of the cases I'm familiar with, stalking is taken more seriously in Europe than it is here most of the time. What makes this even worse is knowing that Alice's restraining order was the second filed against this guy in just a couple of years. This guy is obviously a huge problem and nothing is being done about it. It's very frustrating. Alice contacted the police a second time and told them that she woke up that morning to chocolates and flowers on her bedroom windowsill, which meant that Harry would have had to break into her backyard gate or climb over the fence in order to leave them there. I can't think of anything much creepier than knowing somebody was outside my bedroom window watching me sleep. My house, because of what I do here, is like a fortress. It's almost laughable. My kids are like, Mom. But sit and do what I do all day, every day, and maybe you'll be as crazy as I am. I doubt it, but maybe. As all this was going on, Harry was actually in the army. So the police contacted his superiors at the army and told them that Harry was causing a great deal of trouble for this young woman. Apparently, Harry was just given a talking to because the next day he sent Alice a package with a letter inside complaining that she had called the police and now he was in trouble with his army superiors. So that was super helpful, guys. Super helpful to let the guy know that she's reported him without giving her any actual support. On October 10th, Harry drove to Alice's house and climbed into her back garden again and took photographs of her through her rear window. This is something out of a horror film. This poor woman is just in her house minding her own business, and this lunatic is perched outside her window in her own backyard snapping photos of her. It is unbelievable. Then, sadly, on October 12th, these images were captured. Alice is seen on CCTV inside her office building talking with a co-worker who then offers her a ride home. The cameras track the two out of the parking garage and down the street. Then we see Alice get out of her friend's car and go inside her home. What she does not know is that Harry is sitting here on the street in his white sedan watching everything. CCTV catches his actions as he turns his car around and drives to Alice's apartment. Harry then climbs over Alice's back wall and breaks in the back door. He confronts Alice in her kitchen and she runs to the bathroom. Harry then grabs one of Alice's kitchen knives and follows her, cornering her in that bathroom. Harry stabs Alice 6 times in the throat. Gotta watch what I say here. And he left 24 injuries on her. He then flees, leaving Alice dead on the floor of her home. Minutes later, Harry is caught on CCTV driving away from Alice's apartment. Her roommate comes home and makes the 911 call you heard at the beginning of this story. This poor roommate had walked in and found her friend covered in blood and dead in the bathroom of their home. The police go directly to Harry, who adamantly denies that he has done anything wrong. What he doesn't know is that the police have Alice's phone, which Harry has taken from the murder scene. Once he is confronted with all of the overwhelming evidence, he stops speaking. At trial, Harry, who is an absolute psychopath. This is one of those guys that I'm so sorry for Alice, but I'm also so glad that he was caught at such a young age because this is a truly dangerous and unbalanced person. At trial, he makes this disgusting accusation that Alice actually came at him with the knife and accidentally plunged it into her own neck, and she fell on it during the attack. I mean, what he did to her, ridiculous. Thankfully, the jury didn't buy the bullshit, and Harry was sentenced to life in prison, which in the UK means around 20 years. He has to do a minimum of 22 years in this case. But here's the problem, my friends. Harry is still going to be a young man in 22 years. If anything, he will be more dangerous after leaving prison. So I don't want this to happen to anyone else, and I seriously hope there is some type of very aggressive aftercare and surveillance of men like Harry. He wouldn't get out here in the States, and the thought of him getting out in 20 years in England terrifies me. Alice's parents, Clive and Sue, have set up the Alice Ruggles Trust, and within that organization, they are raising money for various good causes and also to provide training and education on issues like stalking. I think that is incredible and very generous of them to use their voices and their platform to do such great work. I want to send them love from our community and wish them well. Harry Dillon is incarcerated here at HMP Durham, and I certainly hope he spends every day possible there. This is an incredibly frustrating story, The audacity, just the audacity of a man like this to think he is entitled to continually insert himself into the life of someone who doesn't want him in their life. These stalkers have no sense of self-awareness, but they have every sense of entitlement. And sadly, some of them are willing to kill to get their way. I kind of hope maybe someone is having their way with Harry in prison. It's a terrible thing to say, but I'm not always such a great person. Sorry. It's just the truth. This next story I saved for last because it is the most extreme example of the three as to what can happen when stalking is not dealt with. More extreme than murder? Is there such a thing? I guess the only thing that is more extreme than murder is mass murder. Richard Wade Farley was born on July 25th, 1948 in Texas. His father was a military man, and so the family moved around a lot. Richard was the oldest of 6 children. Eventually, the family settled in California, and Richard graduated from Santa Rosa Junior College in 1967. He then went into the Navy, and he stayed there for 10 years. His career was unremarkable. People actually remember Richard as very, very average and unremarkable himself. When he got out of the military, he took a job working as a software technician at a company named ESL, which is a defense contractor in Sunnyvale, California. Through his work at ESL, Richard, who was 35 years old at the time, met 22-year-old Laura Black and told people that he had become instantly smitten with her. Richard talked about Laura all the time, and he said he, quote, instantly fell in love with her the minute he saw her. In the beginning, Laura was unaware that Richard was obsessed with her. But after about 8 months or so, she found out. From around 1982 to 1984, Richard grew bolder and bolder, and soon he was all out harassing Laura at work. Everyone in the office knew that Richard was obsessed with Laura and that Laura wanted nothing to do with him. Laura would actually cry and complain to her friends that she was tired of feeling embarrassed at work with the entire office laughing behind her back. So let's stop for just a moment. This is the early 80s. Things were very, very different back then, and it was typical for women to be mistreated in the workplace. That's just a fact. You would be instantly fired today for one single joke or one single instance of misbehavior back then. But women in the workplace back then experienced jokes and instances multiple times a day. It was very different. I get that. Still, this is a 35-year-old man and a 22-year-old woman. Even back then, this should have been seen as creepy. They're both adults. I'm not saying that every relationship with a large age difference is creepy, but this situation was. Why? Because Laura didn't want it. Laura flat out told Richard she wasn't interested. So let's all say it together one more time. No is a complete sentence. Nothing has to come after the word no. There's no necessary explanation. There's no song and dance required. There's no need to soften your stance with words of politeness. If you feel firmly about something, no is a complete sentence. Richard began bringing gifts to work and leaving them on Laura's desk. Then he started writing her letters and baking her cookies and cakes. So imagine you're Laura. You have to come into work every day, into your workplace, to make a living, knowing full well this older creep that you work with is going to have left something on your desk in front of everyone. So everyone in the office is talking about it, everyone is laughing and snickering about it, and Laura is just having to endure this simply because she needs a job to pay her rent. That was the 80s. It was the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, and still, it goes on more than it should. I feel very bad for Laura and for the other women who have had to deal with this over the years. And there are men too. Don't get me wrong. Never forget that when I tell these stories, I am fully aware. Men deal with these things too. I am the farthest thing from a man hater you can be. I love men, but I am also a hardline realist. And the reality is 99% of the time with these stories, women are the victims. That doesn't mean that the 1% of men don't matter. And if you have stories like this of male victims, please email me those stories because they're kind of hard to find. And I would really like to cover them. So if you know of any, send them to me. I'm just darkheartswithstacylee@gmail.com. Laura would tell people she worked with that she was not the least bit interested in Richard, but that she felt she had to be cordial and polite to him in order to make the workplace a comfortable area for everyone. Nope. Richard is the one making the workplace uncomfortable. Full stop. As if this wasn't bad enough, Richard then starts using the office phone network to call Laura's desk over and over. Why didn't her boss stop this? If anything, it's a waste of company time and resources. Then Laura is at her aerobics class one day and is horrified to look up and see Richard standing in the lobby waiting for her to finish. Next day, same thing. He's back at the gym waiting for her to come out of aerobics class. This guy is, I'm telling you, 2 words. Concealed carry. Makes me sad that I have grown to feel that way. It makes me sad that I feel that I have to be armed, but I'm really getting to a point where I think anybody that spends a lot of time alone, anybody that goes walking alone, you need to be. If you don't want to carry a gun, carry a taser. Then Richard goes to the HR department at ESL and makes some sort of a false report in which he is able to get Laura's home address and her home phone number. Now, I don't know how that could have transpired, but that was all the detail I could find. Then Richard starts cozying up to the janitorial staff at the office building, and he talks one of those employees into giving him a copy of the key to Laura's office. So again, the 80s, but it's still really unreal. Richard even snuck into the HR department at ESL when the building was closed and went through Laura's personnel file. He wanted to know absolutely everything he could about this woman. When he got her home address, he began driving by her house late at night. Richard even got a girlfriend, which is a miracle on its own, but his obsession with Laura continued. He even applied for him and his girlfriend to get an apartment in Laura's building. All throughout 1984, Richard is sending at least 1 letter a week to Laura, and sometimes it's 2 or 3 letters. Once in a great while, there would be a week where Laura didn't get anything from Richard, but that was a rare occurrence. Then Richard's tactics changed. He became moody and angry. Laura would come into work and see that Richard had gone through her desk, not making any attempt to hide that he had been there. Richard started bad-mouthing Laura at work and even contacted her friends to say derogatory things about her. Finally, in the fall of 1985, Laura went to the Human Resources Department at ESL and asked for help. The decision was that Richard would be forced to attend psychological counseling, and he had to stop harassing Laura altogether if he wanted to keep his job. So Richard begins diligently attending these counseling sessions, but he also escalated the tactics against Laura. One day, Laura left her keys on her desk. Richard stole them and made a copy of her house key. He takes the copy of her house key and he writes a handwritten note, and he tapes the key and the note to the dashboard of his car so that when Laura walks by his car, she sees that he has a key to her house with a note saying he can come in at any time. Guys, I'm going to bite my tongue here because I don't want to get into any trouble, but I just feel so angry that Laura didn't have the support that she needed. Richard's letters became more menacing, and he started to reference his large gun collection in these letters that he was sending. And this goes on for years. Richard gets fired at ESL. He loses 2 houses to the bank in this period of time. He got in trouble with the IRS. He didn't seem to care. He was solely focused on Laura. And then, guess what? Richard started to blame Laura for his financial troubles because of course he did. In one of the letters he wrote to her, he said, "You cost me a job, $40,000 in equity taxes I can't pay, and a foreclosure, yet I still like you. Why do you want to find out how far I'll go? I absolutely will not be pushed around, and I'm beginning to get tired of being nice." The audacity. The audacity. In February of 1908, Laura was like, this is it. She went to the police and asked for a restraining order. She was granted a TRO, and then she had the hearing to make it permanent. If you request a TRO, it's temporary. You have to provide enough evidence for someone to sign it, but then there's a hearing later on to make it permanent. The hearing was set for February 17th, 1988, but just as in our other story, the stalker would take drastic action before that hearing could happen. On February 8th, 1988, Richard Farley purchased a 12-gauge semi-automatic shotgun and ammunition for his arsenal of weapons. Despite all of his money problems, he spent $2,000 on guns and ammo that day. One day before the court hearing to make this restraining order permanent, February 16th, Richard walked into the offices at ESL, his former workplace, carrying his new shotgun, a rifle, 2 handguns, and bandoliers of ammunition strapped to his chest, along with a container of gasoline. He entered through the doors of the office building and shot a 46-year-old former friend of his. He blasted his way through the locked glass doors and went straight to Laura's office. As he walked, he fired over and over at anyone he encountered. Before he reached Laura's office door, he'd shot 6 people and killed 4 of those 6. Laura heard the shots. She locked her door and she hid. Of course, her door was no match for the firearms. Richard blew Laura's office door off its hinges with his shotgun. Then he shot at Laura twice. The first shot missed, but the second hit Laura in the shoulder, tearing through the bone. Laura ran to an adjoining office and hid. When she thought it was safe, she ran for her life to the parking lot where SWAT teams were beginning to arrive. Richard Farley continued shooting. He killed 7 employees and wounded another 4, including Laura, and then he barricaded himself inside the building with the dead bodies. For 5 hours, he was in a standoff with the SWAT team, and this is a clip of the audio between Richard and one of the negotiators.
We want you to eventually feel good enough to come out and talk about this, and nobody else gets hurt. And I really appreciate your patience, and it is taking longer than we had anticipated to get people out.
Well, ESL's a big, even this building is a big building. There's a lot of twists and turns in it, and a lot of cipher lock doors, and a lot of, multiple doors in the same room type things.
Yeah, that was a problem with it. That's one of the things that's causing us to take so long is those damn cipher locks, and people won't open them from the inside,
Yeah.
They're nervous, and we're nervous, and they're trying to do it without scaring you, breaking doors down or anything like that. So we want, let you know what's happening at all times so you feel, comfortable.
Well, did you go up on the second floor yet and check that out? The 2 hallways I gave you?
No, I told you we would not do that unless we told you we were going to be doing it.
Okay. Because I'd hoped you guys had, if anybody's laying there wounded or something like that, and I don't know.
In the end, Richard talked and talked, but then he finally surrendered. He went to trial in 1991, charged with 7 counts of capital murder and 4 felonious wounding charges. Laura took the stand against him, and the jury was horrified to hear what she had endured at the hands of this lunatic stalker. One of the jurors said, "Pieces of paper do not stop bullets." And no, they do not. Nothing stops bullets. That's why you have to make sure a bullet is never fired at you. Richard was found guilty on October 21st, 1991, and sentenced to death. A TV show was made about this incident in 1993. It's called I Can't Make You Love Me, and it stars Brooke Shields as Laura Black and Richard Thomas as Richard Farley. It's not bad, it's kind of movie of the week vibes, but worth watching if you're interested in this story. This is Richard Farley now. I found an appeal dated 2009 in which Richard tries to have his death sentence overturned. That appeal was denied. I found Richard by way of an inmate search in California. He is currently 75 years old and he sits on death row in San Quentin State Prison. His status reads, condemned. California has not executed anyone since 2006, and I can pretty much guarantee you that the next person executed will not be Richard Farley, if anyone at all. He's been sitting there rotting since 1992, which is exactly where he belongs. I found Laura Black as well, but it wasn't easy, so I'm not going to share what I found. If she was hard for me to find, that means she doesn't want to be found, so I'm not going to put her information out there. But she has done very well for herself and continues to work in the corporate world. What Laura went through is horrific, and it is my intention to talk about cases like hers and the others we have covered here today, in hopes that it helps make some progress in the world of anti-stalking conversation and anti-stalking laws. No one should have to wait until they're dead for someone to care that they're being hunted like an animal. No one should have to wait until they're shot or stabbed for someone to listen. No one should have to wait until they're gone for someone to finally hear them. Thank you for joining me today on Dark Hearts with Stacy Lee. You know the drill. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you want to see more from me, and you can join my Patreon. That helps keep the videos coming, and in the end, we have a big goal. We're in the midst of a fundraiser. This is the thumbnail. Go to this video on my channel, and it will give you all the details about the money we're raising to donate to police departments. We're trying to solve some cold cases. I hope you're doing well. I sure appreciate your support and you continually watching my videos. It means the world to me. Stay safe, my friends, and be kind to each other. And I will see you next time on Dark Hearts with Stacy Lee. Bye.